Hello everyone, I'm Arali and welcome to my second set of Elite Specialization speculation for End of Dragons. So I already have a first set of Elite Specializations for End of Dragons that I made. There's a playlist on my channel, and these Elite Specializations that I had on there, they were pretty much stuff that just I came up with. I sat down, I thought about what I would like each class to have and kind of thought about all the different things and came up with some stuff. And I also made a roundup video. Now the reason why I only make one video is because my roundup video got way more views than the other ones, and I realized that people probably don't want to watch 9 different 15-minute videos in order to see all the stuff that I came up with and stuff. So I thought that I'm gonna just do one video where I just talk about each Elite Specialization just for a short time and kind of give the concept and just make one video instead of making all kinds of different videos that everyone has to watch, and then that way it's all in one video and stuff. But I also wanted to say that specifically for the traits and stuff, I didn't actually sit down and make any traits because a lot of the traits are your regular weapon traits, like if you have this and this weapon equipped, it gives you extra power or extra vitality or something. And there's a lot of traits that are like just increase your stats based on another stat. So there's a lot of just very cookie cutter traits that kind of just, there's certain values that get changed out, like vitality gets switched with precisions and certain ones and stuff. So I didn't actually sit down and make a set of like traits, but what I will do is, as I talk about each Elite Specialization, I will talk about maybe some interesting traits that I could see that works with it, with certain skills or mechanics or whatever it is, but I won't have like a specific section for each Elite Specialization that concentrates on just that. So with that being said, I also want to say that these Elite Specializations are based more on what people have been asking in the community. We've had a lot of chatter. I mean, my first set of Elite Specialization speculation was released last year, and it's been quite a while since I've gotten comments from people and we talked about it. On streams recently, we talked about some different Elite Specializations that we kind of came up with together. So this next set is kind of based on what people have been asking for, what I've been reading on Reddit, what people have been commenting, and kind of, I know that it's maybe not exactly what people are asking for, but I kind of took what people have been asking for and made my own thing out of it, and maybe hopefully you'd like the way that I kind of gave some twists on some of the stuff that people have been asking for. But these are mostly inspired by the community. A lot of that stuff I did not come up with myself, so credit goes out to those people. I will put in whoever gave me the idea or give out credit where it's due based on the comments or the things that we talked about. So yeah, and with that being said, let's get right into it. Alright, first up we have the Elementalist, and I'm going in the same sequence that I went with my original Elite Specialization speculation that I had, and that was the Sorcerer that I had there, but I called it the Gunslinger. Now, Dennis Dervis left a comment that said the Spellslinger, which was an idea of a double pistol or pistol-wielding Elementalist. So I kind of took that and made the Gunslinger. Now, the Gunslinger gets a bouncing bullet attack that could be like a lightning attack, kind of how the Mesmer has the bouncing bullet attack on their pistol attack. For a fire attack, they could have a small flamethrower, how the Engineer has one of those like little bursts of fire that come out. For a water attack, there could be like a bubble shot, I'm thinking. Something that you shoot and it's like a big bubble and it bounces a few times, maybe leaving some water fields behind for a couple seconds that you could utilize to do a combo attack or something to get some healing in there. And then for like an earth attack, I had like a shot that you shoot at an enemy and after a couple seconds it explodes into like these earth spikes that come out and maybe hit in a little area around the enemy. And yeah, so one attack for like each element. Of course, each element would get, if it's a double pistol, would get 5 attacks. So, but I kind of wanted to give a few ideas on some of the skills. And then for the mechanics, so you still swap attunements like regular on your F skills, but every time you swap your attunements, you load up these extra attacks, these extra strikes that you can activate by pressing that element again. It's kind of like how we have the overload for the Tempest, but in this it's more like a tool belt where you can just press that same button at any time, even if you're in the middle of attacking or dodging or something, and it's like an extra shot that comes out, and depending on the element does something. Like if you're in the fire attunement, you hit F1 again and it shoots out a bullet, and it gives you about 6 extra strikes, like a magazine on a Magnum or something like that. And you can do that for each element, and as you swap through you can use them, and you don't have to use them up. If if you have 3 left, you can just swap to another attunement, just use that attunement. So, but yeah, you would get like this extra kind of these shots that come out of nowhere that you kind of summon, and they kind of attack your enemy. And maybe there could be something that's like one of the elements has like an AoE one, maybe one has one that if it travels through a friendly unit that heals, like the water one could have that where it maybe heals for a little bit. But yeah, so it's like a little extra mechanic there for swapping in the attunements. For the utilities, I thought of tricks, or I didn't think of it. It's actually based on the comment as well from Dennis, but these tricks create clones, kind of like how Mesmers have it. But instead of actually being clones that attack or do anything, these are just clones that as soon as you summon them, they immediately run towards your target and explode. So they're like these kind of, I'm thinking of like how Blake in Ruby has these like copies she can make, and they're like based on whatever element she has in her weapon or whatever, you know, she can make those. So it's kind of in that sense where you get 4 different tricks, of course, and each one is tied to some kind of element, and you can activate it and then have them run towards the target, and they do something depending on which element they're based off of. And they have a special effect where anytime you use that, they like recharge your tool belt, your extra gun, your hidden shots that you have in your entombment, so that you can kind of utilize the extra strikes that you have, and they're on a short cooldown, so you can just go use the 6 up and then use maybe a trick to kind of recharge them. And you could have a trait that goes with it, maybe that kind of has extra reloading on it. So if I use a trick or something, then instead of just reloading 3, for example, on my extra strikes on my F abilities, it does like the full 6 round or something. And that could be like a Grandmaster or something where that plays with it a lot more, where it like the cooldown is a lot less, or it does some extra effect or something. And they could even have a trade where the tricks summon like 2 clones at the same time, because it's not like you're gonna spam the field with clones, because they're gonna be summoned and they're gonna immediately run to your enemy and explode. Or the water one could explode right where you are. They appear and then explode into a water field or something. They don't even have to run up to the enemy. So it's not like you would have all kinds of things, but it's kind of like combining the idea of using a pistol for an elementalist with the idea of having some Mesmer clones a little bit, so having a little bit of an illusion in there. But yeah, that's the concept for the elementalist, the gunslinger. And thank you, Dennis, for leaving that comment and giving me the inspiration to that, so thanks to them. Alright, next up we have the ranger, which I have named the warden. So there was a comment left by Ruby Corner Portugal who said ranger gets shield and becomes a warden, and I kind of just took that comment and ran with it. So this is in opposition to the tamer, which I had the tamer where you get a second pet. That was my first elite specialization speculation for the ranger. This time around we're kind of focusing on the pet, but in different ways. So you get a shield, an offhand shield, and one of the skills could be where you throw the shield and it bounces between different enemies, and each time it bounces it connects the enemies with vines to each other, and depending on how many you have connected, like they get more and more torment depending on how many they have, and maybe cripple or bleed if it's like thorny vines. So giving it a little bit of pure damage by hitting each of the enemies, but also giving some condition damage, so you can kind of make whichever build you kind of want to do. And then the other one could be like the 5 skill could be like a channel that is like a block, but instead of just blocking the attacks, you also knock them back, because the other classes that do use shield, a lot of them do block. They have channeled abilities where they block attacks, but no one really punishes for getting attacked. You know, there's the Ascalonian ghosts that put like burn on you when you attack them when they block, and I kind of thought, I'm like, we don't have anything like that, so it'd be interesting to maybe have like a knockback, or maybe they get like bleeding or something because you're covered in vines maybe, and they're like thorny vines, so maybe give them like a knockback and a bleeding condition, like just 1 stack or 2 stacks of bleeding or something if they attack you, to kind of give some extra damage there if they attack you, and be able to utilize that blocking skill a little bit better. Then the mechanic would be that all your pets are now covered in vines, and that increases their stats. So So we're asking nature to help our pets to get stronger. They also move faster and they also attack faster. So they already have those bonuses through traits and through other skills and things like that, but this is on top of all of that. This is like an inherent just faster attacking, faster movement thing. And then your F2 skills, which are like your beast skills, become stronger as well, where they get extra attack on it, maybe more boons or lowered cooldown, and it's like an elite version of the regular beast skills and making them a lot stronger what they were before. So for the utilities though, I have totems, which are somewhat like banners, where they give you a unique effect. Maybe they could increase damage, or they could do certain things, you know, whatever they want to come up with on the whatever unique effects they want to give them. But on top of that, they also damage. So you can have like a lightning totem that like strikes enemies in the range every few seconds or every second or so. Maybe 1 or 3 enemies get like a lightning bolt on them every few seconds. Then you could have one that has like a pulsing wind effect, maybe, that blows enemies back. So you could have like some break bar stuff there, where every couple seconds or something there's like this wind that comes out and it blows the enemies away, or maybe even pulls them in or something. And then you could have one that does like where the vines come out of the ground and maybe do some bleeding damage, which we have already kind of seen with the Melandru statues and Ore, where the vines come out of the ground and you get like bleeding on you. It would be really cool to have a totem that does like the same kind of effect there. And then the lead would be like a tornado, how the Elementalist and the Engineer have that tornado skill that they have for their lead, but instead this is a totem. So this is not a player that's transforming into a tornado, it's a totem that creates a tornado and it spits out like lightning and rocks and cows or whatever every few seconds at random at enemies, and that would be like the elite skill. But on top of what the totems regularly do, the increasing your stats and damaging enemies, whatever they increase for players, they increase it double for your pets. So if your pet is in range of one of those totems, they get double attack power from it, or whatever it is that this totem does, it gets double of. Like it gives out might every second, so now it gets double might every second, or whatever this totem does. So kind of increasing your pets even more. So it's somewhat of a pet focused class, but it's more like we're empowering our pet to be stronger. And again, I do wish that they would change some of the pet AI, but I think just making the pets stronger would be really cool, to just have like really powerful pets where you have to really be careful, even in PvP and World vs. World, where they don't matter that much nowadays, but you can really wreak some havoc with the Warden Elite Specialization, where it's like focused on the pet kind of, instead of giving us a second pet like I had with the Tamers. So, and this would be my take on maybe an Elite Specialization that's a Shaman maybe, so that's kind of what I incorporated as well. So not only just increasing your pet damage, but also maybe this is what a Shaman would look like in Guild Wars 2. So, but yeah, that's the concept for the Ranger. Thank you to Ruby Corner Portugal for leaving that comment and giving me inspiration. Alright, next up we have the Guardian, which I have named the Avenger. So this one is pretty much the oddball out because I did not like any of the suggestions that people had, and I'm not saying that they were bad suggestions, it's just my own personal opinion. A lot of them made them feel like there was a couple suggestions on like ritualist type of stuff where they summon like light weapons, or where they become like, they get a ceremonial dagger and stuff, and I wasn't really fond of those ideas. And that's because I think with the Firebrand, we kind of got spoiled in a way where the Firebrand has so many options on defensive stuff, healing stuff, damage stuff, where you can do a Condi or a regular damage, that we kind of, I think the Guardian has so many different options now on different builds that I think people are kind of maybe running out of idea. I'm running out of ideas for it, I know that. So I kind of sat down and I made the Avenger, which would be a mace offhand. We already have a mace main hand, which is like a healing one, but this one is like a pure damage, a close range weapon. And maybe one of the attacks could be you get like an AoE light wave that kind of is like how the Focus 5 were. I think it's the Focus 5, where you build up these shields and after a few seconds they like explode out, but this doesn't need any charge time or anything. You just make this like giant light wave that comes around, but it's like super close range, and this is like your way in the fight there with it. Now your F abilities would be called Retribution. So we recently changed the Retribution skills. They are now Resonance resolution skills. And so I took that and I said, yeah, let's bring in retributions back, which are now the virtues. So these function a little bit different. So you can press them and they still do the regular stuff they would do, like with the F1 does the burning on an enemy. But what it also does, it puts a unique effect on the enemy. Now, this effect inherently doesn't have to necessarily do anything, but what happens is if the target dies during the effect's duration, then your F abilities trigger a second time, but around that enemy. So they would trigger around the enemy, inflicting burning around that enemy that just died to all the other enemies around it, or heal your friendly units if you use your F2 ability. So it's kind of like this where you want to use the F ability right where they die, because that way it triggers a second time. So you get like a double whammy out of it, and it would make for a really good like burst thing where you can burst down like a big group of enemies really fast. The only drawback that you would get is a much longer increased cooldown on them, but there could be a trait that maybe makes up for it. So you could have a trait that lowers all of your F abilities cooldown by 20% or something, so to kind of make up for that. But I figured there had to be some kind of drawback, because it sounds really powerful if you think about it, being able to use your F abilities twice. So being able to like cast Aegis twice, if you're like right in the fight and you press F3 on an enemy, you get Aegis and you kill the enemy and they put out another effect where everyone gets Aegis again, that would be a little overpowered, I think. But yeah, so it's just a longer cooldown. And then for utilities, I have rage skills, which are only accessible to, I believe, the warrior right now. And these are a little bit different. So the rage skills would have this duration. So you click it, but it would get a flip over skill that if you use that flip over skill, which is some kind of attack or something, then it increases the duration of your F ability, the effects that enemies get. So if you think that maybe the enemy isn't going to die in the 3 seconds that the F ability is going to last on them, then you can use a rage skill, the flip over of a rage skill, to increase the duration. So for example, you could have one that tethers you to an enemy, and it's a rage skill that tethers you to an enemy, maybe giving you might every second, but instead of you pulling them to you, you teleport to them if you use the flip over skill, and that increases your F ability duration and maybe gives you enough time to kill the enemy in time in order for the second wave of attack, the second trigger of the F ability to happen. So that's kind of my concept of the Avengers. So you're kind of using retribution skills. I kind of wanted to make something that was a little bit unique, so I thought this was kind of nice, having like a close range, like right in your face guardian, because guardians are more about the light and they're not like, this is more like of a warrior than a guardian. But I thought it would be kind of cool to have that for like an offhand mace and kind of right in your face and just going ham with those F abilities. So that was my concept that I kind of came up by myself, and I'm sorry that I didn't go with any of the other suggestions. I wasn't huge about them myself. So next up, we have Necro, which I have named the Judge. Now, this is based off a comment left by CJ Shotgun Angel, who says, I really want Hammer for Necro. Smashing out the souls of enemies would be so damn cool. And I proceed to ask about the names that he had, and he said Death Dealer or Judge of the Dead. So I just called it the Judge and gave the Necro a hammer. And these would be long-range hammer skills. One could be where you place a field on the ground, and in this field, after a couple seconds, your enemies get knocked up, kind of like how the sand sharks have that in Path of Fire. Another skill that I thought of would be maybe where you put this wave around you that extends, kind of like how the Revenant 2 hammer has this field that extends outward, but this time you could have it where it goes in a circle around you. So that was a couple of ideas that I had for skills. Of course, there could maybe some close range, give it like a mix of long range and close range, because you kind of want to have that with the hammer. And for the mechanic would be the Shroud doesn't replace your skills anymore, so we wouldn't get like a new set of Shroud skills, but instead you gain an armor, and your life force bar turns gray, and you gain this like misty gray aura with some armor pieces maybe on you, or something that like floats around you, and it doesn't automatically deplete like if you were in a regular Shroud, but it only depletes every time you receive damage. So it kind of is almost like a break bar that bosses get, but the enemy doesn't necessarily need to use any CC skills supposed to get that out of you. It's just that they need to do damage. And maybe that could be something where you get stability every second while you are in Shroud to kind of give you this illusion of, yes, you have this break bar where you can't be knocked back or something like that. And that could be maybe a trait where this is a Grandmaster trait that gives you stability every second you are in Shroud. So, but I also thought that maybe we could have some alacrity, which would be really nice to have, maybe some quickness or something. So have something where you pulse out some boons every time you get hit from an enemy. So kind of have the balance of, hey, you got hit, so we're giving you something instead while you still have that armor. So that would be kind of cool to really have this almost tank-like thing where the enemy attacks, but that's a bad idea because you get boons every time you get attacked. So that was kind of my idea for the mechanic. Then for utilities, we have manipulations, which kind of would be changed to have a duration. Now, one could maybe in this duration, every time you get a Condi, give you a boon instead. So when someone places weakness on you, you instead get might, or whatever the opposite is of that boon versus Condi thing. Whatever the opposite is, anytime they want to put a condition on you. And it doesn't have to be really long duration, it could be like a few seconds only, but again, giving you a bunch of different boons in the duration would be really nice. And maybe one that gives you life force every time you get attacked. So life force, if you're fighting someone and not a lot of things die around, life force is hard to come by sometimes, especially I'm thinking of like PvP where maybe people don't necessarily die nonstop and stuff. So I'm thinking of maybe giving another ability of gaining life force would be really cool. So every time you get attacked, you get life force and you don't have to be in the actual Shroud to receive that. It's just a manipulation that you can use. And then maybe one that automatically rallies you if you get downed in a duration, kind of like how we have Rebound, where that prevents you from getting that and you get an aura. You could get like a darkness aura. So that's kind of maybe the elite there, where it does the same kind of thing. It's not like a shout or anything, but it's a manipulation because you're manipulating the space. So that's kind of my idea that I had for the judge. And thank you to CJ for leaving that comment. Alright, moving on. Next we have the Mesmer, which I have named the Minstrel. Now this is based off of a comment left by Greedy Bliss, who's always in my streams and we talk about making these elite specialization speculations and stuff, and then also one by Max Neves. I hope I'm saying that right. But both of them have suggested a Minstrel, pretty much, like a Bard elite specialization for the Mesmer. Now this would be, again, another support-based elite specialization, so the Chrono was supposed to be the support, and I understand that in a lot of game types it's still is that, but there's also a lot of builds that deal with damage doing on the Chronomancer, and I want one that's specifically just built to not only be a support but pretty much a healing as well. So there could be some stuff in there where they boost your attack and stuff, but mainly it's going to be for healing, and I want it to be some big heals out there and stuff to really give it like that Bard feeling that you get in other RPGs where they're used as healing specializations. Now the weapon for the Minstrel would be the Warhorn, and it would probably be an offhand Warhorn. They could do a main hand Warhorn that would give it like 3 skills, which would kind of be nice to have, and it would be something that we haven't seen yet, so I'm not totally against that, but it could be either or. Now for skills, we have the Trident, the underwater Trident for the Mesmer, and with that we have the one skill which sends out these like musical notes, and I really think that that's such a unique effect that we haven't seen anywhere else in the game except for one place, and I will talk about that in a minute. But I think utilizing that particular animation or that type of animation where you have those musical notes fly around you would be really cool. They could have it like go around in a circle. They could have one skill where there is these big musical notes that are like in bubbles that float around you, and when they hit an enemy they could explode, or if they go through like an ally they could explode for some healing or something like that. So there's a few skills and there's a lot of stuff they can play around with the theme of musical notes and stuff. And then for mechanic, it would be, you would have, instead of the clones running towards the enemy and exploding, they would pretty much do an effect around them on the spot, which I'm thinking of like the dirges from Siren's Landing. Now this is the only other spot that I can think of where music was being utilized in the game. And so I'm thinking that if you press like your F1 ability, for example, it does like this healing around you and also your clones, and it has like this AoE effect. It doesn't have to be like a huge AoE effect, but it could be an AoE effect where it does it around each of your clones, and they each pull out a different instrument and play like a little tune or something. So to kind of have like this orchestra of different clones that do different things, which I think would just go really well with the theme of having a musical based elite specialization. So I think that that would be really cool to have like different abilities on your F skills, where F1 does healing and regeneration, and then F2 does like healing and then also protection or something. There's like different things they could do, and they could have it maybe where there's a trait that gives out attack power or something that's stacking based on how many of those clones effects they're affected by. So if they are affected by all 3 clones and you at the same time, they get 4 stacks of something that gives them maybe like extra attacking power or something. So to be like a support but also give increased attack power or something like that. The support in Guild Wars 2, the support elite specializations usually go for something where it's not just healing, but it also is like damage output. So they could have some kind of effect where it's like extra damage per clone or per melody that you're in the range of. So it's like a stacking effect, and it'll last for a few seconds, and that would be really cool. Now for utilities, we would have shouts. I know we have a lot of classes that use shouts, but I think that there's something different they could do with it. They could have them be shouts, but they could be echoed by your clones. Now echoes was something that we did have in Guild Wars 1, and they worked a little bit different than from what I want them to work in Guild Wars 2, but it would be like you use your shouts, but also your clones use the shouts. Now the shouts would be like a smaller range, like not a huge AoE effect, but they would be echoed by your clones, so there's again a stacking effect of whatever they're using. So if there is like a healing shout, then it heals each person that's in range of one of your clones, and that in turn would give you probably like extra healing. Maybe like it could give you, based on how many allies were hit by your shouts or your echoes, that gives you more healing. Maybe they could have a damaging one where it does damage around you, and the more it echoes, the more damage it does. So they could have like a stacking effect on that. So the whole elite specialization is kind of based off of stacking different effects based on how many clones you have, and having like kind of this chorus, this kind of orchestra, this concert of different clones with different musical things, and kind of build the whole theme of that elite specialization around that. And of course, thank you to Max Neves and Greedy Bliss, and of course Greedy Bliss always being in the streams and stuff, so thank you to both of you for the idea on that. Alright, next up we have the Revenant, which I have named the Envoy. Now, I do want to talk about the name and the implication of those things. So in Guild Wars 1 factions, we saw the Envoys, and they were struggling with Shiro because Shiro was one of the Envoys and he did not do what he was supposed to do, so they end up helping us and stuff like that. So I was thinking maybe making an elite specialization for the Revenant where you channel one of the Envoys, and we have seen some of the Envoys' weapons, but it could be some of the ones that we haven't seen. And I know that the elite specializations or the specializations for the Revenant are based off of like different animals and stuff, different like species of creatures on Tyria. So I don't know if this would be like we're still channeling a human, because we're already channeling Shiro as a human, but the Envoys were very strange kind of people, because there was one with like this minotaur head, and a lot of them looked like really strange. So they could be just classified as envoys. I know that some people wanted to do maybe like a Tengu legend. Now I was having a really hard time coming up with like a Tengu legend that we could use that was even used in lore at all, because even Kala was pretty random, I feel like, for a lot of even Guild Wars 1 players, because we didn't really know who Kala was, and Guild Wars 2 players barely, I mean, any of us had barely heard of her and stuff. So, but for Tengu Legends, it would be really hard because there's not much we know about the Tengus, and even if we were to use one of the Tengus from way back in Guild Wars 1, none of them wielded a greatsword, and that's where I kind of ran into the issue because a lot of people have been asking for the greatsword on Revenant. There was 2 comments left for the Revenant having a greatsword, so that's kind of what I wanted to base that off of. There was one left by Professor X Devil who said, my wettest dream is a Dreadlord style Revenant with a greatsword, with lots of AoE and some tankiness via lifestealing around him and telekinetic illusionary weaponry. So kind of like a Death Knight kind of thing. So that, and there was also left one by Imamori that talked about a Revenant with a greatsword and channeling Jorah. So I don't know about the channeling Jorah. That would be something that we haven't seen before, a Norn, but I don't know how that would really fit into the factions kind of thing. Kala didn't fit either, so Jorah might be something that could work, especially coming off of Iceboot Saga. So, but yeah, so somewhere around that, Envoy with a greatsword, something channeling one of the heroes. I'm not sure, maybe channeling one of the envoys. I'm not sure, but that's kind of what I came up with. So the skills would be long range skills, of course. We don't have very many long range greatsword skills, but it would be really cool to have that. I think a lot of people really like that idea. I was thinking of maybe one that is like a drain attack, how we have the regular Necro Shroud 5 skill, where they kind of have these beams go out and you apply like all this torment to them and stuff. You could kind of have that where you like drain your enemy, or you could have like how the Dagger 2 on Necro has, where you like drain their life force out or whatever, and these like blood bubbles come out and you kind of absorb that. It would be kind of around that way. Maybe have one where you throw your greatsword and it like explodes in like this mist explosion on impact or something. It would be really cool to kind of have something that's a long range for a greatsword and be not a Mesmer, because Mesmer is the only one that has like a long range greatsword, so it'd be kind of cool to have a twist on something like that. Now the mechanic would be you get a Mist Shroud with F2 and you move faster and take reduced damage, so it's kind of like you blend into the mist and you use it to move around quicker, but it continuously drains your energy. Now instead of draining your energy, instead weapon skills now recharge your energy while you're in the Mist Shroud. So it kind of flips it over, where instead now they give you a lot of energy while you're in there to kind of try to maintain that. And I really wanted to play with something that had to do with the energy system, because I feel like the energy system is not quite that perfect, and I think having both weapon and utility skills drain your energy is kind of annoying. But if we have a Mist Shroud that we could jump into once in a while, where now weapon skills recharge them, I think that would be a really cool idea. So having that, and then maybe having a trade where you recharge even more based on like what weapon you're using or something like that. Maybe have that as one of the options for like a Grandmaster trade where you get like extra energy and you can stay in this Mist Shroud a lot longer. Now for utilities, I would use Spirit Weapons, and that is based off of what Professor X Devil said, and kind of have like these illusionary weapons that you summon, like how the Guardian has them. And I think that the Guardian being the only one that has Spirit Weapons is kind of a shame and kind of a waste, because I really like the idea of Spirit Weapons, but we would have to have different kinds. So I was thinking of maybe like axes. So you have these like illusionary axes that maybe throw around axes in a little AoE. You could have a staff, which could be maybe the elite, and it does like a knockback in a small area to kind of give them some ability to break the break bars. Maybe some daggers that do like a bouncing dagger attack where they throw these daggers but they bounce between enemies, kind of giving it a little bit of an AoE, but also being reminiscent of the bouncing daggers that we had in Guild Wars 1 for the assassin. And maybe like a short bow where it does like a spread shot, so it does like, it just focuses on an enemy and it does like a spread shot or something. So kind of giving it different things that you could use with Spirit Weapons, and kind of taking the whole envoy thing and being part of the mist and stuff, and maybe having some of those Spirit Weapons even replenish some energy based on how many enemies they hit. Yes, they can still drain energy, but maybe give them some more energy stuff. I really don't like the energy system, and I've said this many times, so I wish there was some more energy management that they would put into not just trades but also the different skills and stuff. Instead of just straight out having them all drain, maybe give me some ability to gain back some of the energy, to kind of play around with that and stuff. So, but yeah, that's what I had for the Revenant, and thank you to Professor X Devil and Imimori for those comments. I appreciate it. Okay, so we're almost getting to the end here. Next up is Thief, which I have named the Shadow Knight. Now, I didn't really name that. Once again, the credit goes pretty much to Greedy Bliss. We had a stream recently, it was a Guild Wars 1 stream, and we were talking about how I was having a hard time coming up with a Thief Elite Specialization speculation for this video. So we sat down together and we talked about it for a while. So we came up with like the samurai kind of theme, which I thought was really cool because it was very stark contrast to the Shadowmancer that I had come up previously, so for my last Elite Specialization speculation. So this time we have the Shadow Knight, which would wield a great sword as well. And now some of the skills that we talked about was one where you slam your sword into the ground and you absorb damage, and maybe you get a flip over skill, and with that flip over skill it gives like AoE protection and does damage with like these dark flames that come out, so kind of giving it somewhat of this like Dark Knight feeling. Now there's also like a rush attack, how there's a rush attack for the greatsword on warrior, but instead of running towards the enemy, you shadow step to them and you do like an attack. Then maybe there is like a spin attack, and the spin attack sends out like these dark chains and it pulls in 5 enemies but in a small radius. So kind of a Dark Knight kind of themed like samurai greatsword attacks, which would be really cool. Now the mechanic steal now doesn't steal items but armor, so you wouldn't get like stolen items as your F2 skill, and it also doesn't shadow step anymore. Now the stolen skill applies barrier based on how much armor you have stolen, and you can kind of stack it, so the more often you steal without using your F2 ability, the more you stack up the armor that you have stolen, and it could be like a maximum stack of like 5, and then 5 being like the max amount of barrier that you could have. So it's kind of like this defensive type of Elite Specialization where you concentrate on giving barrier and defensive abilities and being right in the thick of it, but also having abilities to maybe jump around a little bit with some of the, the rush ability and kind of blinking in and out of action. That kind of is like the signature of the Thief still. Now for the utilities, I came up with this thing where we kind of talked about, because Greedy Bliss's idea was to kind of make these signets in a way. It was kind of like already something that we had, because we already have signets where it was like a passive effect and you can activate it with a active effect. But I thought of maybe using facets. Facets, it was only something we have seen for the Herald Elite Specialization. So they're based on duration now. So they're not like an initiative cost or anything as you like have them as the duration goes on. But instead they now have a specific duration, and maybe they could have one facet that does damage every second. And the flip over skill for this one would be like this massive AoE damage, and it ends the facet, of course. Then another facet could be something that applies like conditions like poison and burning or something in an AoE, but then the flip over skill cures conditions to kind of give you that like opposite thing where it's like, okay, I'm applying conditions, but here I am curing conditions, maybe even in an AoE for your allies. And it could maybe even give resolution, which helps against conditions. Now, the healing one could give out healing every second, kind of how the healing facet for the Herald does, where it gives out regeneration every second. Now, this could be like healing every second for the duration that it has, but then the flip over skill applies resistance and resolution, but also heals for like a big chunk. Then another one could be one that gives out boons, like Aegis, Might, Regeneration, Protection, something like that. But then the flip over skill would be like a daze, like a short daze for the enemies around you, or maybe even a stun to kind of help with break bars again, because you kind of want to have that utility in there as well. And then an elite facet that I thought of was something that gives like AoE barrier maybe, and the flip over taunts enemies and gives you stolen armor for each enemy that you hit. So if the facet hits 5 enemies, for example, you could get 5 stacks of stolen armor right then and there, and you can activate your F2 skill to even give more barrier, to kind of give it that feeling of this really hardy, really strong samurai themed like Shadow Knight that's right in the thick of it, and kind of balance out what we have with the Thief, because the Thief is a very squishy class and it would be kind of a lot different, so with the Shadowmancer I went the mage way, and then here we would be going with like this tanky thing. So, and as always, thank you so much Greedy Bliss for that help on the Elite Specialization on this one. I was having a really hard time with that, so thank you so much. So next up we have the warrior, which people have been asking for staff all over for the warrior, and I think a lot of them go with like the damage dealing, close range kind of thing. I just think that the warrior has that, so much of it, so much of just close range damage dealing thing, and I know that it's a warrior and that's what he's supposed to do, but elite specializations are kind of supposed to make that feel a little bit different, and I think that the spellbreaker doesn't really make that feel any different, and the berserker doesn't either. None of them are long range, and they're both pretty much just damage dealing in their own little ways, and they're both pretty much close range. So I came up with a healing spec, which I've called the monk, and it uses the staff at about a mid range or so, at like a 900 range. Like I said, I was having a hard time coming up with something, so I really sat down one day and I came up with all of the stuff, so there's actually a lot to go through. So first up, let's talk about the skills. The auto attack would be like 3 slices, so you kind of swing your staff and these air slices would come around and they heal allies that it passes through and then does damage on whichever enemy it hits. Then there would be one attack where mystical energy spins around the character and it heals allies and it heals conditions as well around you for like 3 to 5 seconds. And then there's a rush forward attack where you kind of rush forward with the staff, kind of swing it around, and you knock back enemies or knock them to the side as you pass through them, and you heal allies that you touch. Now, some people might think of the inspiration that I've had for them, and I'm gonna just straight up say that the inspiration for a lot of this stuff comes from the monk in Diablo 3. I really like the monk in Diablo 3, and I really think that a lot of what the monk has in Diablo 3 would translate really well into Guild Wars 2. So that's kind of what some of the skills are based off of, and the idea and the whole concept is kind of built off of, because we're going into the mechanic now, which adrenaline now becomes spirit, and it gets like a lighter yellow color. Maybe it's not like a regular like orange color that it has, but it's like a lighter yellow color, and the F1 now becomes a healing skill, and it's kind of like how the Necro regular Shroud 5 skill has those beams that we talked about earlier, but instead it connects to allies and it heals them per interval, and it's like, you know, 3-second cast or something, every second it heals, and depending on how many bars of spirit you have, if you have like 3 bars of spirit, it connects to more people. So if I have 1 bar, it connects to 3 people. If I have 2 bars, it connects to 4 people, and if I have 3 bars, it connects to 5 people, and healing a lot more allies around you. So you connect to a lot more depending on how much spirit you have saved up. Now the drawback is that you gain adrenaline, or now spirit, at half the amount or speed. So if there is abilities, you know, regular attacks or whatever, it doesn't give you as much adrenaline anymore. It only gives you half, because it has to be some kind of drawback, and I think that just constantly pumping out your F1 as a healing skill would be a little bit overpowered. So I kind of wanted to balance that out by having reduced adrenaline amount that you gain, or the speed at which you gain adrenaline. Now for the utility skills, I was having a hard time as well because I couldn't really come up with anything, but I decided to go with mantras, and these would be a little bit different than what the regular mantras are. These would be ground targeted, and they have a max target of 3. Now the healing mantra heals allies, and it heals you for more allies that you hit. So if you hit 3 allies with your healing mantra, you get healed more than if you were to only hit 1 friendly unit with that. So one mantra could give you boons, or boons to allies even, depending on whatever boons. They could be might, they could be regeneration, protection, something like that. Maybe one mantra could knock down up to 3 enemies, whichever are hit, to maybe give some break bar damage in there as well. And then an elite mantra could steal health from enemies and give extra spirit to you for each enemy that's hit. The drawback of not gaining as much adrenaline, but then with that ability you could maybe gain more to actually give you a really good reason to have that mantra. And I think that there could be some traits that could maybe increase the enemies that are hit. Maybe they could have a Grandmaster where the enemies hit would be like from 3 to 5 or something like that. There's a lot of stuff they can work with that, where for example they could deal with like the whole adrenaline gaining. There could be some abilities that give you passively adrenaline or something, or give you more if you're wielding a staff or something like that, you know, the regular traits that we have pretty much. But yeah, that's what I came up with. This is based off of some people asking for the staff on the monk, which there were a lot of them online, but there was only one comment that was Imamori, which had like a whole set of them. But one of the things that Imamori said was warrior with a staff, which would be a kung fu warrior. So that's kind of what I came up with based on that. And yeah, I hope you guys like that one. And last but not least, we have the engineer. For this one, okay, seriously, I'm gonna put all the names, all the comments on stream. There was a bunch of comments, and I've seen a ton of people online. I mean, it's so much in demand that we do a Golemancer. So I was like, okay, we'll do a Golemancer. We'll do a Minion-mancer based thing. We'll call it the Golemancer, and we'll give it the staff, because that is what everyone has been asking for. And I really hope that ArenaNet will listen to that, because that is what everyone wants. So maybe some of the skills could be a beam attack, you know, something like how we already have beam attack on the Druid staff or something, where it does like hits enemies for like burning damage or something. And maybe something where like a ground target where you drop like a bunch of debris on the enemy, maybe like a twirling attack that shoots out missiles or something out of the staff. There's a lot of stuff they can do with having a staff, a long range staff, and have it like mechanical and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff they can play with that. For the mechanic, F1 now becomes a summoning skill, and there's 4 bars that fill over time, so you don't really have to do anything. There could be some traits that interact with that where it fills it up faster, but once you activate it, it summons golems. It summons these little golems. We've already seen small little golems, like those toy golems or whatever that we use for the Priory in one of the missions and stuff. So they could summon those little ones, and that just kind of run up to the enemy and attack them, and it could be up to 4 of them. So if you do it where it's just 1, then you just summon 1. For 2 bars is 2, and then for 3 bars it's 3, and for 4 it's 4. So, and it would summon these little golems that you can send out, and they would expire after like a set amount of time maybe. And for the utilities, you would get these golems, which are minions, and there could be 4 different ones, and they could have like different models. Maybe you could have like this animal model where it looks like a panther or something. Kind of give us something new. We've already seen golems, and we've already had actually the Asuran racial skill is already a golem, but I wish maybe some different models, and each of them maybe in a different color. They could have like that metal plating, but you know, the energy that runs through them, maybe have them in different colors based on what they do. Maybe one that gives out boons every second, maybe one that does conditions, maybe there's one that just does regular damage, maybe there's one that gives out barrier or something to like friendlies around, and have them just do something different. And then when we go back to the F skill, you could have for trades where maybe you could have them do different things based on which Grandmaster you pick, like the top being they do damage, the second one being maybe where they heal, and the third one being where they maybe do like some kind of protection thing or barrier thing or something. So you can kind of pick your own playstyle. I always love to do that, and with this set of Elite Specializations, I really didn't do that, but give it options on what you want the Minion-mancer, the Golemancer to be like. Do you want it to just deal damage? Then you want to pick the top line. If you want to defend a lot and kind of give it a more tanky aspect, you can pick the bottom line. And if you want to do like some healing with it, you can pick the middle line. So that would be kind of cool if you had those options there. But yeah, this was highly demanded. There was a lot of comments that I had for it, and I've seen a ton of it on Reddit where people just want a Golemancer. So I really hope ArenaNet goes with that. So, but yeah, that's what I came up with. Thank you everyone for commenting that. And yeah, so that was the engineer, the Golemancer. So we're at the end here. So those were the 9 elite specializations that I came up with based on what the community has been asking for, what I've been seeing people ask for, and me putting my own twist on those things. I didn't just go straight up with what everyone else has been wanting to do, because then again, I mean, I feel like I could just copy whatever everyone else comes up with, but I kind of wanted to put my own twist on it. And yeah, so this is what I came up with. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I wanted to put it all in one video because I didn't want to make like 15-minute videos, 9 of them. So I kind of just did like 5 to 6 minute segments for each class, kind of come up with some concepts and stuff and talk about it. So if you guys want to leave a comment, you're more than welcome to start a discussion. I would like to hear if anyone else has come up with anything interesting. And I also want to talk about how on our Discord server we have a channel called Ideas, where some people have posted some stuff about it, how they come up with their own elite specialization, and everyone is more than welcome to join. Let me know if you want to join that. The information is down below. If that that doesn't work, just message me on Discord. I will add you in there, and yeah, and let's post some discussions and stuff, and let's see what we come up with. We're really close to getting to the stream where they're going to be talking about it, so we only have a little bit of time left until those are revealed and we can speculate, so which is super exciting. I'm really excited. But yeah, that's all I wanted to do today, and thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the streams or in our next video. Thank you guys so much.